Making a knife from a lawnmower blade. Part 2, Edging and Grips. William Hovey Smith, 2021. This is Hovey Smith, the Backyard Sportsman, and we are resuming our work on making a knife from a lawnmower blade. In Part 1, I covered forging, designing, thinning, and shaping, a few scenes of which follow. The first blade I put in is coming up the heat. Okay, that's looking a little more like a knife. We have 3 steel pins driven deep into this block of wood. So this will enable us to hold it and true up this surface. I've done polishing on this 220 grit belt, and that has removed a lot of the deep horizontal scratches left here from the 30 grit belt that I started with. And the next polishing later will be with a Scotch-Brite wheel. But for now, we are ready to remove the blade from the block, which has supported it during the grinding process, and start to put an edge on the blade and polish the other side, which incidentally is distinctly convex in shape. To show you just a little bit of the process, to support the blade to the block and keep you away from the hot metal. We're now going to dismount the blade from the grinding block, and hopefully a few taps will do it. Just one? Okay. That's excellent. And this was some of the spikes that were used. That's out. All right. So now we're going to polish this side and edge the blade. Looks pretty grody over here, doesn't it? Looks not too hot on this side, but terrible on this side. Well, we're going to fix some of that. I have detached my spikes, and I'm going to use them again. But you'll notice I've changed the position of the blade because we're going to grind here as well as remove all this scale. Well, we're going to sight some holes. And start setting our blade. And one. Now the blade is firmly held in the block. And does everybody do it this way? No, they don't. Most bladesmiths are macho folks, and they hold the blades with their hands. Well, yes, you can do it that way. Been done that way for centuries. But mounting it up on something like this that you can actually hold gives you a longer grind at the time and more efficient production. For the next hour at least, I'm going to be on this machine. And I'm starting off with 180 grit, so I don't get quite the deep scratches that I did with the 30 grit grind, although that removes a lot of metal when you need to. And we're going to also start putting a bevel on this blade. And initially I may go back to 30 grit when I start the bevel. But right now I want to go ahead and get this scale mostly off the blade. So that's how we get started with it. You notice I did a little rocking motion here, and that helps. Some things have started to come up on the polishing that are sort of interesting. One is a series of numbers and letters stamped on the blade that I really had never seen, and deep pitting along here, which I'm not going to really try to grind out. I'm going to leave this. But now is the time to start working on the edge here and actually doing the final shaping on the point. Now the point is already thin, and that's because the blade was thinning in this direction anyway. So we have to be careful about it and not get it overheated. Mostly now we're going to be working on this flat platen and trying to hold the knife as steadily as we can so we get a good even grind all the way across. Now that we're wanting to move serious metal again, I'm going to work with this 30 grit coarse belt. And I suspect you're going to see some sparks fly.
I'm moving the knife very slowly and evenly across the belt.
If a knife is described as a tool with an edge, well, we now have an edge forming, and we have ground that using our coarse grit paper. And now I'm going to take it off and go to a 180 grit and get this cleaned up a little bit, as well as start polishing the cutting surface here. And it's not quite got a sharp edge on it yet, but we are certainly getting there. And now we're going to do blade dismount number 2, and it should come off pretty easy actually. There we go. And our nice pins did their job. Now we're going to hand hold the blade and do the initial polishing with 180 grit and 220 grit before we heat treat. When we come back from heat treating, this will spend additional time on this machine as we put the final edge on. Very soon a blade of this size will become so hot you can't hold it. So I've got a bucket full of water down here to quench it in. While the knife is in heat treatment, we're going to start working on the scales. What I'm going to use for scales is Burmese rosewood. And this is getting to be a very rare and expensive wood these days. So this little piece is 25 bucks. I'm putting my blade in the oven now so it can be heating. And we'll also get the oil bath ready, as we'll quench it in oil. I don't know anything about this particular steel. I have seen it successfully oil quenched before, so I assume that's what it's like, but we will find out. And we're going to heat it and hold it at 1855 degrees. Rosewood is hard, and I'm going to use this bandsaw as if it were a scroll saw to help cut out these initial blanks. Using the fence enabled me to cut out this nice rectilinear piece here. this little tray. I'm working out little cuts in here so I can get the blade flat and cutting one nearly in a straight line without having to twist the blade. So that's one rough side of the handle cut, and now we do the other. While it's true that you do grind the scales together with the blade, the part that you will never ever be able to touch once you mount it on the knife is the edges here that actually face the point. So now you want to true these up and make them as near identical as you can. Now I've already lined up the back and the bottom here, so these are our two reference points. So now we'll grind these down to where they're flush and also identical in profile in this direction. Okay, now we've got that part done. My blade is now at temperature and has been at that stage for approximately 5 minutes. So we're going to get our tools and prepare to retrieve and quench. Now this bent coat hanger is a peculiar tool for retrieving that blade from that furnace, as well as plunging it down in its quenching fluid. It has a right angle turn. The hook here has been straightened slightly, and you will see its utility when we get it in use. I'll turn off the furnace. If you touch the live electrical connections with something metal, yes, you could get quite a shock. Focus you towards my welding and forging nook, where all the hot and flame takes place. Knife successfully retrieved. Down in the quench. And flaming, as it usually does. And retrieve. Looks almost as gross as it did when we started. The knife came through the quench successfully in that it is as straight as it ever was. Now, did it harden? Yes, do believe it did. Sounds good too. An unhardened blade sounds sort of funky when it falls. Now that we've knocked the rough scale off, or at least much of it, we're going to another instrument, the Scotch-Brite wheel here, where we're going to proceed to polish the blade and take some of this scale, take the remainder of it off. After being worked with a Scotch-Brite, you can see that the blade now has a polish, but the pits in the original lawnmower blade are still there. They haven't been ground out, and they won't be. And it's revealed its name, ST4293. So, okay. And this is what the reverse side looks like. So it's going to have a rustic, almost molten look to it. It's now ready for some grips, and I'm using the knife itself as a template to sight the holes And I'm using exactly the same bit I used to drill the steel. And we are through. One hole done. For pins, I found some 6mm screws, and yeah, they're going to work. Now, because of the irregularities of this material here, I'm going to have, I suspect, some gaps like here and here. So this is going to have to be filled with a thick mixture of epoxy to hold, plus the pins. To help things along, I'm going to take these pins and heat them with a torch, and then just allow them to anneal to a more soft state so I can peen them should I have to. Before I mix the epoxy and put the scales on this knife, this is my last chance to really inspect the blade and see if it's sharp enough to do what I need it to do, and if I got it hard enough. It didn't look quite right when I actually plunged it in the oil. I would have liked for it to get a yellow rather than a red. And so we're going to see what it's actually like. I'm going to use this little small stone and strop up the edge and see how she cuts and feels. At this stage, you do not want to cut your fingers. It should cut the paper cleanly with just the weight of the blade. You see here some failed attempts. It is dragging a little bit. Well, it passed the test, but I would say marginally. Proceeding to mix up our epoxy here. And what we're using is JB Weld, and that for the reason we have so much void space to fill in these grips. I'm an author, mainly of outdoor books, but I do have some significant business titles as well as my new novel. The business title is Make Your Own Job Anytime, Anywhere, at Any Age, and teaches individual entrepreneurship and how to get ideas that you formulate yourself for new businesses. My novel, Until Death Do You Part, An American Family Meets Their Sicilian Cousins, is available on Amazon and other book sources as a softcover, ebook, and also as an audio title.
NST 4293, reporting for duty. This knife will next appear when I have some game to clean with it. Now, many other styles of blades might have been made from this lawnmower seal. If there is demand, I will do more of them and show you some more of my distinctive patterns. Now, if you own such a knife made by your dad or granddad, cherish it. It is worth refurbishing and or rebuilding to pass to future generations. Literally hundreds of these knives and similar ones have been made. In the future, I will experiment with different tempering temperatures and media, as well as working techniques to see which gives the best results. If you attempt to make your own knives, use extreme care. Pay attention to what you're doing. Buy my books and help support this channel. My new novel, Until Death Do You Part, An American Family Meets Their Sicilian Cousins, and my new business book, Make Your Own Job, Anytime, Anywhere, at Any Age, are both available from Amazon and other sources as a softcover ebook and as an audiobook. Hunt what you eat and eat what you hunt. Goodbye and God bless.